done? What came over me? Who am I? It was wonderful. I loved every minute of it. But
at 78 years old, Sally Field has had an amazing career in Hollywood. She has won 2 Oscar awards and played many memorable roles that people still love today. Everyone knows her as one of the most beloved actresses in the movie business. But behind all the applause and great performances, there's a side of Sally that most people never see. It's a side that remembers every betrayal, every insult, and every co-worker who treated her badly. Now that she's older and wiser, Sally Field has decided to talk about some of the most difficult experiences she had with other actors. These weren't just small arguments or quick disagreements. These were serious conflicts that happened both on movie sets and behind the scenes. Some of these problems affected her career and stayed with her long after the movies were finished. Here are the stories of 6 actors who caused her the most trouble during her long career in Hollywood. The relationship with Burt Reynolds. Sally Field's romance with Burt Reynolds was big news in the late 1970s. The media loved writing about them, and they seemed like the perfect Hollywood couple. When they worked together in movies, especially Smokey and the Bandit, they had great chemistry on screen. They looked charming, playful, and seemed to really care about each other. The movie became very popular, partly because their relationship seemed so real and natural. But when the cameras stopped rolling, the truth was very different and much more troubling. Sally later said that Burt was a controlling person who liked to be in charge of everything. He enjoyed being the center of attention and didn't like it when anyone, including her, might take some of that attention away from him. This caused serious problems in their relationship. Burt would often put Sally down in ways that seemed small, but were actually very hurtful. He would make fun of how she looked, question whether she was smart enough, and criticize her acting skills. He did this in sneaky ways that might not seem obvious to other people. For example, he might say something that sounded like a compliment in interviews, but it was actually meant to make her feel bad. Then when they went home, he would give her the silent treatment or make passive-aggressive comments. In her book called In Pieces, Sally wrote honestly about what her relationship with Burt was really like. She explained how he wouldn't let her speak freely when they were together. He would interrupt her when she was talking and make decisions for her, both in her work life and personal life. He wanted her to stand next to him, smile, and stay quiet. She felt like she was just a prize that he wanted to show off to other people, not someone that he truly loved and respected. The emotional manipulation was even worse than the control. Burt would be sweet and loving 1 minute, but then he would suddenly become cold and withholding as a way to punish her when she did something he didn't like. Over time, this treatment started to damage Sally's sense of who she was as a person. Even though she was famous and successful, she often felt like she disappeared when she was with him. Sally admitted that she never felt like Burt really saw her for who she truly was. She said, "I was there, but not me, not the full me." Even after spending years together, she was never sure who the real Burt Reynolds was. The man that the public loved and admired was completely different from the man she lived with at home. Despite all the problems, she kept trying to make the relationship work because she wanted to love him, and she did love him. But in the end, he hurt her too much. While the world saw him as a charming movie star, to Sally, he was just heartbreak disguised as love. Working with Tommy Lee Jones, when Sally Field got the chance to work on a movie called Backroads, she was excited about the project. The script was interesting and different, and it gave her a chance to play a character with real depth and complexity. She came to work ready to collaborate with the other actors and create something meaningful together. But instead of finding a supportive co-worker, she ran into a wall of silence and coldness from Tommy Lee Jones. From the very first day of filming, Sally found Tommy Lee Jones to be dismissive and unfriendly. He barely said hello to her during rehearsals, wouldn't make small talk like most actors do, and refused to have the normal conversations that help actors build trust and work well together. His approach to work was very cold and businesslike. He would come to the set, stand in his assigned spots, say his lines exactly as written, and then leave. He showed no warmth, no respect, and no interest in building any kind of working relationship with her. This behavior was very confusing and hurtful for Sally. She had built her career on being emotionally honest in her performances and creating real connections with her co-workers. She wasn't just acting opposite a character who was supposed to be cold, she was acting opposite a person who was actually cold to her in real life. Good coworkers are supposed to help each other give better performances, but Tommy Lee Jones made her feel like she was just getting in his way. Sally tried many times to break through his coldness. Between takes, she would try to start conversations, ask questions about their characters, and even tell light jokes to make the atmosphere more relaxed and friendly. But Tommy Lee Jones never responded positively to any of these attempts. Sometimes, he wouldn't even look at her when she was talking. She felt like he treated her as if she didn't belong on the movie set with him, as if she wasn't good enough to be working at his level. When Backroads came out in theaters, the critics wrote negative reviews about it. Many of them specifically mentioned that there was no chemistry between the two main actors. What the public didn't understand was that the problem wasn't really with the script or the story. The problem was that there was real emotional coldness between the actors, even when the cameras weren't rolling. Sally later said, "We were supposed to play two broken people learning to love, but I was playing alone." Even though she stayed professional during the entire filming process, she admitted that the experience was very draining and difficult for her. The movie set wasn't just cold because of the character they were playing, it was cold because of how Tommy Lee Jones treated her personally. For someone like Sally, who needs emotional connection to do her best work, this kind of distance felt like he was deliberately trying to sabotage her performance. After Backroads was finished, Sally never worked with Tommy Lee Jones again. In later years, when reporters asked her about that experience, she never said anything really harsh about him, but the way she talked about it made it clear that she hadn't forgotten how unpleasant it was. The experience taught her that a movie set could feel very lonely and isolating when your coworkers don't treat you with basic kindness and respect. The chaos of Robert Blake. During the filming of a project called Say Goodbye Maggie Cole, Sally Field had to work with Robert Blake, who turned out to be one of the most difficult and unpredictable people she had ever encountered in her career. Robert Blake was known for being a method actor, which means he tried to become completely absorbed in his characters, but he was also known for having erratic mood swings and being very hard to work with. From the beginning of the project, Sally found it almost impossible to find any kind of rhythm or routine when working with Robert Blake. He would change his lines without telling anyone ahead of time, go completely off script in the middle of scenes, and ruin carefully planned shots by doing things that nobody expected. What he probably thought was creative spontaneity, Sally saw as complete chaos that made it impossible for everyone else to do their jobs properly. Sally felt like Robert Blake was deliberately trying to undermine her work, not just when they were filming scenes together, but also during the times when the cameras weren't rolling. His difficult behavior wasn't limited to how he treated her either. Members of the film crew reported that he would have frequent angry outbursts, go on verbal tirades where he would yell at people, and have sudden mood changes that created a hostile and uncomfortable environment for everyone who had to work with him. The unpredictability was exhausting for everyone involved. One day, Robert Blake might be quiet and focused on his work. The next day, he might start shouting at a lighting technician for no good reason, or storm off the set because of a minor disagreement about something unimportant. Sally, who was already dealing with the pressure of playing a demanding role, found herself trying to act as a peacekeeper just to keep the production moving forward. But it was an impossible situation that she couldn't fix. The tension and chaos that Robert Blake created started to affect every scene they filmed together. The problems became so obvious that they couldn't hide them anymore. Eventually, the entire project fell apart completely. The movie was never finished and never made it to theaters or television. It became a complete loss because the on-set problems had spiraled so far out of control that there was no way to solve it. For most actors, having a movie project canceled would be disappointing from a career standpoint. But for Sally, the experience was much deeper and more personal than that. She later described working with Robert Blake as not just disappointing, but actually traumatic. She said, "There are actors who act, and there are actors who try to make everyone else small, so they feel big. Blake was the second kind." These weren't just harsh words. They came from someone who had been genuinely hurt by the experience. Sally walked away from Say Goodbye Maggie Cole with a firm decision. She promised herself that she would never again put up with chaos and abuse that was disguised as artistic genius. The experience taught her that she had to protect herself from people who used their talent as an excuse to treat others badly. The Steel Magnolias tension with Shirley MacLaine. When Sally Field was cast in Steel Magnolias alongside Shirley MacLaine, most people thought it would be a perfect match. Here were two Hollywood legends sharing the screen in a beautiful story about love, loss, and the strength that comes from enduring difficult times. But behind the scenes, the relationship between Sally Field and Shirley MacLaine was nothing like the warm, supportive friendship that audiences saw in the movie. Problems started as soon as the cameras began rolling. Sally approached the film with the emotional sensitivity that she was known for. She connected deeply with her role as Malin, a mother dealing with terrible grief. Sally wanted to bring honesty, vulnerability, and subtle emotional truth to her performance. But Shirley MacLaine seemed to approach the entire project like it was a competition that she had to win. People who worked on the movie quietly gossiped that Shirley treated every scene like it was a power struggle. She would constantly brag about the Oscar awares she had won in the past, dismiss direction from the film's director, and interrupt takes to insert herself into moments that were supposed to belong to other actors. It seemed like she couldn't stand the idea that any other actor might have a powerful moment that didn't include her. Sally tried her best to remain professional and gracious throughout the filming process. She smiled even when she was angry, hit her marks exactly where she was supposed to be, and tried to keep her focus on doing good work. But privately, the situation was wearing her down and making her feel exhausted. One particularly emotional scene took 17 different attempts to film, not because Sally couldn't perform it well, but because Shirley MacLaine refused to play the scene in a straightforward, honest way. She kept adding sarcastic comments and jokes, turning what was supposed to be a moment of raw grief into something comedic. It seemed like she was deliberately trying to undercut Sally's emotional performance, as if ruining the scene was somehow part of her plan. Years later, when reporters asked Sally about working with Shirley MacLaine, she would only briefly mention the difficulties they had. She said that Shirley brought a cloud of chaos wherever she went. Sally didn't say this with obvious bitterness or anger. She said it with the kind of clarity that comes from having time to think about a bad experience. The conflict between them wasn't just about having different approaches to acting. It was a clash between two very different personalities and egos. Shirley MacLaine seemed to need to dominate every room she entered and control every situation. Sally simply wanted to serve the story and create something beautiful and honest. The damage from their conflict lasted long after the movie was finished. While audiences cried during Malin's heartbreaking speech about losing her daughter, Sally knew that the real pain had happened when the cameras weren't rolling. She never forgot how much it hurt to be treated that way by another professed, Sional actress. The psychological warfare with James Woods, Sally Field's work on a movie called Kiss Me Goodbye, was supposed to be a fun, light-hearted experience. It was planned as a romantic comedy with a quirky twist, designed to charm audiences and give everyone involved a chance to do something playful and entertaining. But from the very beginning of the project, Sally sensed that something was wrong, that something turned out to be James Woods. James Woods had a reputation for being brilliantly talented, but also intensely brooding and difficult to work with. He brought with him a kind of energy that turned what should have been playful, fun scenes into psychological warfare. James Woods didn't just say his lines the way they were written in the script. He would take them apart, analyze them, challenge the director's vision, and often rewrite dialogue on the spot without warning anyone else. Every rehearsal became like a battle that Sally had to fight. She had always been known as a collaborative performer who was emotionally honest and easy to work with. But she found herself being steamrolled by James Woods' aggressive approach. Sally later said that James Woods was intellectually intimidating, the kind of person who used big words and sharp, cutting language not to have real conversations, but to show that he was smarter and more important than everyone else. On the movie set, James Woods would question everything about the script, criticize the director's choices, and even comment on Sally's performance while they were still in the middle of filming scenes. This created an atmosphere of constant tension that made it impossible for anyone to be creative or do their best work. But what disturbed Sally the most happened when the cameras weren't rolling. James Woods would casually suggest that Sally wasn't giving enough effort to her performance, that her heart wasn't really in the work. During one particularly emotionally demanding day of filming, he accused her of phoning it in, basically saying that she was being lazy and not trying hard enough. This comment hurt Sally much more deeply than James Woods probably realized, or maybe he knew exactly how much it would hurt. To Sally, his criticism felt less like someone trying to help her improve, and more like someone deliberately trying to sabotage her confidence. James Woods wasn't pushing her to be better. He was trying to make her feel smaller and less sure of herself. After years of working hard to earn respect in an industry dominated by men, having another actor treat her this way was particularly bitter and painful. Sally would later think back on the experience not as an acting challenge that helped her grow, but as a psychological minefield that she had to navigate carefully just to survive. She said, "It wasn't the role that wore me down. It was having to constantly defend my worth." She walked away from that movie set not just exhausted physically, but emotionally transformed by the experience. From that point on, Sally made herself a quiet promise. She would never again allow herself to be silenced or diminished by a man who mistook being condescending and cruel for being brilliant and talented. The experience with James Woods taught her that she had to protect herself from people who used their intelligence as a weapon against others. The Humiliation by Dustin Hoffman. To most people in the world, Dustin Hoffman is considered a legend in the acting world. He's an actor who is known for excellence and has played roles that earned him Oscar awards and praise from critics everywhere. But to Sally Field, Dustin Hoffman represents something completely different. He wasn't a mentor who helped her career, and he wasn't a collaborator who worked well with her. Instead, he was a bitter disappointment who caused her genuine pain. Sally and Dustin never actually appeared together in a finished movie, but their paths crossed in the early 1980s during auditions for a project that never made it past the planning stages. For Sally, this was supposed to be a promising opportunity that could lead to good work. Instead, it turned into one of the most humiliating and demeaning experiences of her entire career. During the chemistry read, a type of audition where actors read scenes together to see if they work well as a team, Sally said that Dustin Hoffman had already taken control of the room before she even walked in. He was making jokes with the producers, making pointed comments about the script, and generally acting like he owned the place. When Sally finally got a chance to begin her reading, Dustin interrupted her multiple times. But he wasn't interrupting to help her or to collaborate on making the scene better. Instead, he was interrupting to correct her delivery, comment on her choices, and question her interpretation of the character, all in front of everyone else in the room. Sally wasn't just being critiqued in a helpful way. She was being publicly humiliated by someone who seemed to enjoy making her look bad. Sally described the experience by saying it felt like auditioning for a man who'd already decided you weren't enough. This was particularly painful because Sally wasn't some inexperienced newcomer to the acting world. She was a two-time Emmy Award winner who had already proven herself on both stage and screen. But Dustin Hoffman made her feel like a schoolgirl who didn't know what she was doing. The situation became even worse when Sally learned more about what had happened behind the scenes. Later that week, she heard from someone they both knew that Dustin Hoffman had actually bragged about sabotaging the audition. He reportedly told people that the chemistry wasn't there between them, and that he had made sure of it. To Sally, this wasn't just unprofessional behavior, it was deliberately cruel. It took Sally a long time to recover from what had happened during that audition. For weeks afterward, she questioned herself and wondered if she had somehow messed up the opportunity. She kept thinking about what she could have done differently, even though the problem hadn't been her performance at all. But as time passed, Sally gained clarity about what had really happened. The problem hadn't been her acting or her preparation. The problem had been Dustin Hoffman's need to control the room and prove that he was the smartest, most important person there, even if it meant stepping on someone else and crushing their confidence. Sally later called this experience one of the most humiliating moments she'd ever endured professionally, and she said that it changed her forever. From that point on, she made a firm promise to herself. She would never again work with men who mistook arrogance and cruelty for genius and talent, and throughout the rest of her career, she kept that promise. Conclusion. These 6 experiences with difficult male actors shaped Sally Field's approach to her career and taught her important lessons about standing up for herself in Hollywood. Each of these conflicts showed her different ways that power can be misused in the entertainment industry. From Burt Reynolds' emotional manipulation to Dustin Hoffman's deliberate humiliation, Sally learned that talent doesn't excuse bad behavior, and that she had to protect herself from people who would try to diminish her. Through all of these difficult experiences, Sally Field continued to build an incredible career based on her own talent, professionalism, and emotional honesty. She learned to recognize the warning signs of people who would try to control or undermine her, and she developed the strength to walk away from situations that weren't healthy for her. Her willingness to share these stories shows other actors, especially women, that they don't have to accept mistreatment just to work in Hollywood.